Hi, very good morning. I am Dr. Janak Patel, MD, General Physician. Today we'll be discussing on one of the very interesting clinical symptom which you might see once in a while in your everyday practice, and it is very useful to differentiate three groups which can produce similar symptoms we call claudication. Ideally, when you use the word claudication, means it is a pain in a calf region due to lack of blood supply, or we call it lack of oxygen and nutritional supply. Secondary due to arterial occlusion, and that pain is induced while walking and relieved by rest. I am discussing this particular topic because recently only I had one patient who came with pain in only one limb, mainly in the calf region, and it was only on walking for a very short distance. It was little difficult to differentiate between an arterial causes, and similar type of symptoms can occur also due to other pathophysiology we call as neurogenic claudication, or it is also called as a pseudocolic claudication. And similar symptom also you can get when there is a venous insufficiency, chronic venous insufficiency. So we'll try to discuss these three aspects and try to find out what exactly is claudication, what are the other condition which mimics identical like claudication, and how practically you approach. So we say holistic approach to claudication. The meaning of holistic means in medicine it is characterized by the treatment of the whole person, taking into account mental and social factors rather than just the physical symptoms of a disease, because claudication is a symptom, and that symptom, if clinically you diagnose that this is claudication and you confirm it, this claudication is because of peripheral arterial disease. So indirectly it was also described as a coronary artery disease which produces damage to myocardium, and stroke which produces damage to brain. This particular produces damage to calf muscle, and hence peripheral arterial disease is very frequently associated with coronary artery disease and very frequently associated with stroke. So indirectly, if you pick them early, you can give a proper treatment, identify if a person is having any coronary artery disease or person is likely to have a stroke, and you can prevent this to major damage and decrease mortality. Now similar type of symptoms which mimics claudication you can get in a person who are having night cramps, sciatica, that is we call neurogenic claudication. That is a neurogenic claudication due to lumbar spinal stenosis. You can have identical symptoms secondary due to varicose vein. So these three conditions you have to differentiate from true claudication. So we'll be talking regarding that. So first I'm starting with one case, 62-year-old male smoker with type 2 diabetes present to a clinic with complaint of pain in both calf region on walking. As soon as the person comes to you with calf muscle pain on walking, we ask few questions, and that should be asked to almost all person who comes with complaint of pain in both calf region on walking. that is how far you can walk before the pain occurs, and this is called claudication distance. And what do you make to pain go away? Means if a person says that I wait for a while, I take rest, my pain disappears in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So that is a very, very important clue. Then third question, does pain radiate anywhere? Now if a person says that pain is radiating from back to calf, it cannot be claudication. Do you have any back pain? If any person who comes to you with pain in a back region, radiating posteriorly to calf, it has to be a neurogenic cause rather than peripheral arterial disease. So this becomes a very important clue. Do you have any wounds and or do you feel pain at rest? Now this is also very important, because if a person is getting pain even at rest, and particularly when the person is elevating the limb, that is rest pain, and that goes in favor, more in favor of peripheral arterial disease. And if a person is having non-healing ulcer, or we call trophic ulcer, non-healing trophic ulcer, particularly on the plantar surface of the foot, again it is more in favor of a peripheral arterial disease. So some of this clue is very, very helpful. So if the patient has got wound or rest pain, the diagnosis is not intermittent claudication. The diagnosis is critical limb ischemia and should be managed as early as possible. And here it is clearly shown that smoking is one of the cause which can end up with peripheral arterial disease leading to intermittent claudication. The patient is a smoker, ask about cessation, when he has stopped, how long he was smoking, how much he was smoking, etc. This is a clue which tells you that if the person is getting pain on walking and there is a lower limb pain with history of diabetes, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, it goes in favor of peripheral arterial disease. And if a person is getting pain even while taking a rest and foot elevation, that also goes in favor of what we call as peripheral arterial disease, and this particular symptom will describe as a rest pain. Classically, you can see that person is holding the limb and he is walking. So this goes in favor of claudication. Here we have written already, we'll say not 20%, more than 20% are asymptomatic. So this particular group should be also picked up as early as possible. Here is the second case, 57-year lady, cigarette smoking, hypertension, alcohol abuse. She is on Ramipril 5 mg OD, complaints of lifestyle limiting late intermittent claudication, 50 meters pain-free walking distance, and there is occlusion of, on a Doppler ultrasound, it shows 15 centimeter long subocclusion of mid segment of superficial femoral artery. Now this is a clear-cut evidence on a Doppler ultrasound that this is a occlusion of a mid segment of femoral artery, and that gives a restriction to a walking. So which treatment for lifestyle limiting claudication with a long subocclusion of superficial femoral artery? Yes, quite simple. You have to have a choice from this four. Will you go for a medical treatment purely, say, antiplatelet and statin, or you will go for medical treatment and exercise training, or you will go for medical treatment endovascular revascularization of superficial femoral artery, or you will go for medical treatment, revascularization, and exercise training. Indirectly, we have got a fourth treatment we call medical treatment, exercise training, endovascular, revascularization. All these are the standard treatment. Person should not end up with endovascular revascularization and the end stage we call as amputation. So as early as possible, a diagnosis is very important. Reduce all the risk factors and then have medical treatment, exercise training as the prime thing. A medical treatment with exercise training is the best in the initial stage. So this should be the choice. And if person doesn't get result with a good medical treatment, good exercise training and lifestyle modification, then person should go for endovascular revascularization. And then finally, if person develops gangrene or person develops critical limb ischemia, which can also end up into gangrene, then you might require even amputation. So now we are starting with what is claudication. Claudication is derived from a Latin word which means limb. So claudication is a pain or tired feeling or weak feeling that occurs in leg usually during activity, mainly as walking, and goes away in short time once the person takes a little rest. There is a complete relief of symptom should occur within 5 to 10 minutes. It should not be necessary for the patient to sit to obtain relief. So classically, claudication is associated with arterial stenosis or occlusion. The symptoms are secondary due to inadequate or decreased blood flow to the muscle affected. And whenever there is an increased demand, there is already a decreased blood flow. Because of increased demand, the muscle need more oxygen. The supply is less. So muscle now will have anaerobic metabolism. So glucose will be metabolized by anaerobic metabolism. It will end up into accumulation of lactic acid, and that will stimulate pain nerve fibers, giving rise to claudication. And when the person takes rest, demand decreases. So the production of lactic acid will reduce, the pain will reduce, and person will be benefited. The person who gets claudication may complain of different types of symptoms like cramping, aching, tiredness, or heaviness. Any one of these symptoms person can complain depending upon his way of explaining. So pain in a muscle or a muscle group brought on by exercise, relieved by rest, and calf is the most commonest muscle which is being affected. No pain at the start of exercise, fairly constant claudication distance. So the amount of distance what a person gets before claudication, person is pain free, and the distance what he walks and then he gets a claudication pain, that much distance is called claudication distance, and the time taken for walking that distance is also called as claudication time. As the disease advances, distance becomes short, time also becomes short. So this becomes a very important clue to find out even the progress of the disease. The most common risk factors are all the risk factors which ends up with atherosclerosis, like diabetic, old age, smoker, hypertension, history of coronary artery disease, hyperlipidemia, all the factors which will end up with what we call as peripheral arterial disease, that is secondary due to atherosclerosis. So claudication distance shortens when person walks uphill or rapidly also, and that also suggests that the disease is serious. The commonest signs and symptoms will depend upon what the site. Say if it is involving aortic iliac area, we call aortic iliac peripheral arterial disease, person will complain of pain in a buttock region, thigh and hip region, and occasionally in calf region, along with erectile dysfunction in a male, and that is called Larichi syndrome. If there is an occlusion in femoral artery, we call as a femoral popliteal peripheral arterial disease, and person will have a pain in a calf region, and this is the most common. And then you can come across what we call as a popliteal artery involvement. This is not common. When the occlusion becomes much more, person starts getting rest pain. So chronic preceded by intermittent claudication, and this we call as a critical limb ischemia, because sooner or later when the occlusion further increases, person will go into a stage what we call as a non-healing ulcer, trophic changes, non-healing ulcer, and person can develop gangrene. So rest pain, non-healing ulcer, and development of gangrene will be going into a stage what we call as a critical limb ischemia. And if there is a acute occlusion of the artery, we call as an acute limb ischemia. This is not preceded by intermittent claudication, because this is very frequently due to thromboembolism. So mainly because of an embolus which will block 100%, and as there is a 100% occlusion, it will end up with gangrene. So that is acute limb ischemia, which will need an emergency surgical intervention. So clinical manifestation, mainly because of narrowing of the lumen, ischemia, intermittent claudication, pain will be felt during exertion and reload with rest. There's a reduced supply. You will find diminished pulse or absent pulse, and because of decreased blood supply, there is a skin changes in the form of a dry shiny skin with a loss of hair, thick brittle nail. The nail in this foot will be affected. There will be no edema, and usually the limb will be cold, relatively cold. Usually we say that in a peripheral vascular disease, or indirectly we get the person who is having a peripheral arterial disease, who is having claudication, will have a 6P because of lack of oxygen supply. We call pain, unrelieved, at rest. You will get paresthesia. Pulse will be weak or absent. There will be pallor. The extremity will be cold, and even person can have weakness. When you get all these things, do suspect peripheral vascular disease. Also, you can have a painful, sharp, round ulcer, which we call as a trophic ulcer, which usually is a non-healing. So it takes time to heal. And when you elevate the limb, there is a pallor. And when you put the two limbs, there is a dependent rubor or redness. Redness below the affected artery. This is because of dilatation of some small arteries to allow more blood. This vessel lose their ability to constrict, and that we call as a dependent rubor. This is again in favor of, you can see the color difference between the two, and that is called dependent rubor, and that is in favor of what we call as peripheral arterial disease. And when the person gets a complete obstruction, you will start getting gangrenous changes. You can see this is the gangrenous changes. And when iliac artery is involved, you can have impotency, or we call as erectile dysfunction, and that we call as a Larichi syndrome. Atherosclerosis is a systemic disorder 50 to 75% of the peripheral artery disease also have a coronary artery disease. Invariably, they end up with ischemic heart disease, and also they can have, this is not only carotid artery, we can call cerebrovascular disease, and can end up with stroke. Now, peripheral vascular disease involving peripheral arteries, coronary artery, and cerebral blood vessels. So leg, arms, and other organs may be also involved. And we know the commonest causes: atherosclerosis can end up with thromboembolism, and when it ends up with thromboembolism, it can end up with an acute limb ischemia. And there are other conditions also which can have a thromboembolism. So you should also keep that thing in mind. You can have sometime thromboembolism ending with acute limb ischemia. There are other diseases we call it inflammatory condition which involves the peripheral artery, that is Buerger's disease, and there is one another condition we call as a Raynaud's phenomena, which can be secondary Raynaud's, secondary due to dyslipidemias, vibration injuries, etc. You should keep that thing in mind. The commonest risk factor we already discussed: diabetes, hypertension, old age, smoking, etc. Most common. Now, one of the close differential diagnoses in peripheral vascular disease is venous disease, and we call chronic venous insufficiency. And secondary to chronic venous insufficiency, person will develop what we call as a varicose vein. So we'll be discussing difference between the two. Here, peripheral vascular insufficiency, secondary to vein, we call as a peripheral venous disorders, or we call chronic venous insufficiency, where the blood cannot be taken back to the heart. While in peripheral arterial disease, the blood cannot be pumped towards the leg, and so there is a decreased oxygen supply. Here the oxygen supply is good, but the blood cannot be taken back, and that leads to almost similar type of symptoms. So you have to differentiate night cramps, sciatica, lumbar spinal stenosis, varicose vein, etc. So there are three common conditions which you will have to differentiate: arterial disease, neurogenic condition, that is we call as a lumbar spinal stenosis, and chronic venous insufficiency. And that should be very, very important to differentiate between those three conditions. So you will have to differentiate these three, that is peripheral arterial disease, neurogenic, and venous conditions. Also, sometimes osteoarthritis can be misleading, particularly knee joint osteoarthritis. You should keep it in mind, but it is very easy to identify osteoarthritis. There is something very typical of what we call as non-arterial etiology. Atypical claudication, pain with exertion. Pain does not stop the patient from walking, may not involve the calf muscle or other major muscle group, and does not resolve within 10 minutes of rest. If you find these particular things, think it is something else other than arterial condition. But we'll be going in detail as we go by. So these are the three common conditions, and these are the simple most way to differentiate, and then we'll be going in little bit more detail. In arterial, the quality of pain is cramping. In venous, good number of times they describe as bursting pain. In neurogenic, it is neuralgic pain, or we call shooting pain, radiating pain. Arterial claudication, onset wise, it is gradual, and there is a fixed distance we call as a claudication distance. While in venous, it is gradual, and good number of time it is immediate pain. while in case of neurogenic can be immediate and it is inconsistent. So there is no fixed distance. What a person will tell you. We'll be going in further detail as we pass through the some of the slides. Arterial claudication is relieved by standing for a short period. By and large, it is less than 10 to 15 minutes. While venous claudication is relieved by elevation of foot. Neurogenic claudication is relieved by sitting down and bending forward. This is very, very typical of neurogenic claudication. Very, very typical. So relieving factors gives you a differentiation very nicely between arterial, venous and neurogenic claudication. Location, usually arterial will be calf muscle groups. If it is higher up, it may be in a thigh or in a buttocks. Venous is usually the entire limb, while neurogenic is usually the posterior side of lower limb, starting from back right up to heel region. Entire limb, but mainly posterior side, very frequently. It is L5 region, L4, L5 region. And legs, by and large, arterial is usually unilateral. Venous is also quite frequently unilateral, while in neurogenic it is usually involving both lower limbs. Now there are very few things which will help you to differentiate between arterial and venous. Very, very important. If you do a ABI, ankle brachial index, by measuring a blood pressure at ankle and measuring a blood pressure at brachial artery with the help of stethoscope or with the help of Doppler, and if you get the ratio of ABI in ratio, and if the ratio is less than 0.95, it is more in favor of arterial, and if the ratio is more than 0.96, it is more in favor of venous. Usually in arterial you will get an absent pulse or weak pulse, while in venous the pulse will be normal. If you palpate the lower limb, usually in an arterial it will be cold, while in a venous the extremities will be warm. In a venous, edema will be invariably the most common features, while in an arterial usually there will be no edema. Color of the limb which is affected will be pale, and if it is a critical limb ischemia, it can be even showing you cyanosis. And in case of venous, the color will be normal, and good number of times there may be hyperpigmentation because of pigment deposition, secondary due to chronic venous insufficiency. Ulcers of arterial ulcers are usually round with a smooth margin. They are very commonly on the plantar surface, while venous ulcers are irregular in shape. They are close to the ankle. Skin is usually shiny. There is a loss of hair. While in case of venous, the skin is pigmented. These are the few differences which will help you. Very, very important differences between arterial and venous. Will be further showing you the difference between arterial and neurogenic claudication. There are few diseases which will also help you out to find out the other causes which can end up with peripheral arterial disease. We call RRBB. Raynaud's phenomena, you will have a cold fingers. It will be usually affecting the ring fingers very commonly, and they will be cyanosed. In Buerger's disease, it will be a cold feet and cold hand, and you will have a cyanosis in both upper limb as well as lower limb. This helps you to differentiate a Raynaud's disease and Buerger's disease. So little examining the upper limb also will help you out. Mainly in Raynaud's it is upper limb only, while in Buerger's upper limb as well as lower limb both may be involved. So do keep it in mind. So Raynaud's phenomena is different. In Raynaud's phenomena you get vasospasm leading to pallor, followed by cyanosis, followed by rubor. So on exposure to cold, exaggerated sympathetic activity, vasospasm, pallor, dilation of venules, accumulation of deoxygenated blood, you will develop cyanosis. And then as the spasm goes away, you will have a rubor. There are some conditions which will give rise to primary Raynaud's. Particularly, it is heredofamilial, more common in woman, female, young female. There is an exaggerated response to cold, long-standing skin and subcutaneous tissue changes will be seen. You will have occasionally ulceration. It affects more in upper limb. So this is primary Raynaud's, while secondary Raynaud's will be very common in Burgers disease, SLE, scleroderma, etc. And in this particular condition, you will end up with ischemic ulcer, gangrene, and what we call as auto amputation. This is very, very important. So if a person comes to you with a severe cyanosis, ischemic ulcer, always think more in terms of a secondary Raynaud's, and secondary Raynaud's will affect both upper limb as well as lower limb. While primary Raynaud's will very frequently affect upper limb more common, and you can see even cyanosis at the tip of the nose, even in earlobe. Burgers disease, it is very commonly associated with cigarette smoking, more common in male between 20 to 40 years of age, and it commonly affects the lower limb more common as compared to upper limbs. And it can involve medium size as well as small size artery like tibial, radial, etc. Will not go into detail regarding this particular slides. Now here there is a little difference between venous symptoms and arterial symptoms. So good things we already discussed before, but there is one good slide which I could collect from YouTube. So I am putting this particular slide. So peripheral venous disease, if it is venous, it is warm leg, so the pulse is present. Edema is the most common feature. There is irregularly shaped shores, exhausting pulse. This particular is irregularly shaped. No sharp pain, usually it is a dull aching pain, and there is yellow or brown ankle because of pigmentation. While in case of an artery, it is absent pulse, loss of hair, cold extremity, round red shore because of blood pooling. There is a change in the toe and feet will appear pale or even sometimes blue, and there is a severe sharp calf pain, and particularly it is on walking, and person gets relief on rest, and there is a fixed distance when the pain starts, we call claudication distance. Now in a venous, when you elevate the limb, person gets benefit, while peripheral arterial disease, when the person hangs the limb will become reddish, we call as a arterial pooling, and that gives a clue that this is arterial, while in venous the congestion will be reduced when the foot is elevated, and even edema will also reduce. This is one clinical clue which can be utilized to differentiate between venous and arterial. You can see here on hanging, these are the two limbs. This is little pallor, then it will become reddish, or we will call rubor. Now this is a simple difference between neurogenic claudication and vascular claudication. In neurogenic claudication, there is a typical description of the pain. It is a vague, cramping, aching, sharp burning pain in a lower extremity. It will start from right from the back, buttock, and in the lower limb. Well, this will be mainly in the calf region. Vascular claudication is usually complaining like tightness, cramping pain. This will radiate from proximal to distal. Well, usually this is localized pain, very commonly in a calf muscle region. On even standing, particularly with extended trunk, less with walking, and whenever a person uses bicycle, because while doing a cycling, person usually bends, that relieves the pain, unless a person does extension of the spine. So only on extension, that is on standing, usually person extend the spine, the pain is increased. Here, with walking or bicycling, or we call bicycle test, the pain will be exaggerated, will increase the pain. When you sit, usually you flex your limb, that will reduce your pain, or on flexion or on squatting, the pain will be reduced. While in vascular claudication, with sitting and cessation of muscular activity, pain will be reduced. Time of relief is prolonged, while here rapid. Within 10 to 15 minutes it will be relieved. It will take a longer time. Walking up the hill, there will be more pain or less pain, while here the pain will be increased. Walking down the hill, because pain with lumbar hyperextension, because when you are walking down the hill, the spine is extended, so pain will be aggravated. Here also the pain will be aggravated because you are doing exercise. In neurogenic, back pain is very common, while in a vascular, back pain is rare, or we call uncommon. There is a limitation of spinal movement in case of neurogenic claudication, because as soon as you start doing extension movement of the spine, the pain is aggravated, while here there is no restriction to the spine movement. So this is one simple difference between neurogenic claudication and vascular claudication. There are other symptoms also which we will be discussing. We have discussed this few of the symptoms. Sensory symptoms will be frequently present in neurogenic claudication, while sensory symptoms will be almost absent. Muscle, or we call motor weakness, will be more common in neurogenic claudication as compared to vascular claudication. It is usually absent, motor weakness. If you look at the reflexes, reflexes frequently present. Vascular claudication, reflex changes will not be seen, so it will be absent, what we call as a hyperemia. Pulse will be in a neurogenic will be normal, while here it will be reduced or absent. You will be able to auscultate the bruit over the narrowed artery very frequently in a vascular claudication, while here there will be no bruit. So these are some of the other difference which you can take into account to differentiate between neurogenic and vascular claudication. And we have already mentioned atrophic changes, that is cyanosis, hair loss, etc. will be more common in case of vascular claudication as compared to what we call as neurogenic claudication, also in venous also. And aggravating factor we have already mentioned, that in a neurogenic claudication, erect posture and hyperextension of the spine will aggravate, while any type of a leg exercise like walking up the hill, down the hill, etc. will increase the claudication. And when you do the physical examination, neurological examination will tell you that in case of a neurogenic claudication, you will get some asymmetrical finding, while in case of a vascular claudication, usually it is symmetrical. Straight leg raising sign, usually sorry, this should be vascular. SLR usually, oh sorry, SLR will be positive, femoral stretch usually negative, pulse present, symmetrical and diminished. This will be vascular. This will be vascular. There is some problem. Okay. Skin will be normal. In neurogenic, yes, skin will be hair loss. Okay, okay, that's it. That's the neurogenic examination, occasional finding, usually asymmetrical, while in case of vascular findings, neurogenic finding will be rare, and if at all it is there, very frequently symmetrical if they are present. SLR test usually negative, while here always it will be negative. Femoral stretch test will be usually negative, while this will be always negative in case of a vascular claudication. Pulse will be present or symmetrically diminished, while in case of vascular claudication it is diminished or absent, and very frequently one will be more affected than another. That's why we call asymmetrical. Skin changes will be more common in vascular, like hair loss, atrophy, smooth round ulcer, non-healing ulcer, etc., which will not be seen in a neurogenic claudication. And bicycle test, where person usually bends, the person will get relief. If person does hyperextension while doing a bicycle test, then only the pain will be aggravated. While here, positive with the spine in any position. So if a person has got spine involvement, then the person will get relief with bending forward. While in case of vascular, any type of exercise in any position will increase the pain. Now this is again a little difference between lumbosacral, that is neurogenic claudication. Age incidence is between 30 to 65, while intermittent claudication is very commonly after the age of 60. This is usually subacute to acute onset, 60% spontaneous recovery in less than 12 weeks, while this is insidious onset, progressive, till person develops rest pain and person ends up with what we call as amputation. Pain characteristic we already described. This is radiating pain, sharp pain, good number of time person describe burning pain, and worst than back pain. Leg pain is worst than the back pain, while here usually it is a dull aching pain, tired pain, cramping pain, etc. Heavy feeling in legs. Localization mean mostly good number of times this may be unilateral and starting from back to lower limb, mostly to the posterior side, that is L5 root, L5S1 root. This good number of time intermittent neurogenic claudication, it is bilateral. Provocation, increased pressure on cuffing, standing, sitting or walking. Well, this will be on standing, walking or with straight back. Relieved by lying down, that is lumbosacral radicular pain. While this neurogenic claudication will be relieved by when you drive the bicycle or a bike because you bend forward, or sitting down, or acquiring a squatting posture. Physical examination will show you diminished strength, diminished sensation, reflexes will be preserved, and there will be SLR will be positive. So in what we call a sciatica, SLR test will be positive, while here no abnormal finding in intermittent neurogenic claudication. So this is a little difference between what we call as a radiculopathy and lumbar spinal stenosis. This already we have discussed before, that is vascular and neurogenic, we have discussed before. So this is one slide which I found to be interesting, so I have put, already we have discussed in previous slides. So lumbar spinal stenosis, indirectly we call this as neurogenic claudication, which is mainly a central canal stenosis, and that gives rise to compression of the roots, maybe a lateral roots or maybe a descending roots, and good number of time this patient will have a leg pain, back pain, pain will be also in buttocks, cramping pain of the calf, heavy sensation, and there is one typical sign described, grocery cart sign, because when a person is going for purchasing a grocery, usually puts in the cart, and while pushing a cart he bends forward, and at that time the pain is relieved. So this is a very characteristic sign. So good number of time person will give you that particular history, while I'm going to purchase the grocery, and when I'm pushing the cart my pain is relieved because of flexion of the back, and that is very characteristic sign in a lumbar spinal stenosis, and that particular group of people you must suspect and you must investigate properly. So this is a typical, when you do hyperextension, pain is there, when the pain disappears while pushing the cart, because while pushing the cart you are bending forward, you get relief. This is very characteristic. And when you bend back, the foramen is reduced, person gets pain. So while leaning forward, pain is relieved, and while leaning backward, pain is increased. This is a characteristic of what we call as lumbar spinal stenosis. Very, very easy. So walking is bad for both condition, in case of vascular as well as in case of neurogenic. In neurogenic it is more in the back, radiating to the back side, while in vascular it is mainly in the calf region. If you sit, it is good for both condition. So when a person is sitting, it will be beneficial for vascular as well as for neurogenic also. So sometimes it becomes very difficult in this particular group. But if a person gives you a very characteristic history that pain is bad on standing and bending back, it is more in favor of neurogenic, while in vascular, when he stands, it is relieved. So do keep that thing in mind. And particularly when the person is using the bicycle, vascular claudication will be aggravated in any position, while when the person is bending on a bicycle, in case of neurogenic claudication, it will be reduced. So this is some of the important clue. It is exaggerated by bending back, and bending forward the pain is relieved in a lumbosacral. So these are some of the clue which will help you out to differentiate those things. You have to differentiate another condition which can produce similar, that is disc, prolapse intervertebral disc. There is another we call pyriform syndrome. I'm not going into detail. That is, you will have to differentiate. We already shown you that slide. We have shown you this slide. This is the difference between, this is a sciatica, or we call it a radiculopathy, from lumbar sacral stenosis. So you can go back again and find out the difference between the two. So these are all the different conditions. These are all the different pathophysiology which will produce back pain and pain in the lower limb. You will have to differentiate spondylosis, spondylolisthesis, spondylitis, and spondylosis. All these are, you will have to differentiate between all different. Here the facet is damaged. Here the spine is displaced forward. Here there is a change in the space and in a spondylosis there is a degenerative changes. These are all the different things which you can get, and in this there is a peculiar sign which is being described on an X-ray, because there is a fracture of the lateral spinous process. So spondylosis, spondylolysis, spondylosis, spondylolytic, and spondylolisthesis. So keep all this thing in mind. This you will have to differentiate. This is mainly an orthopedic. I am not going into detail. So there is a natural history of peripheral arterial disease, that by and large this peripheral arterial disease is associated with the risk of ischemic heart disease, stroke, and mortality is high. 40% of the patient with peripheral arterial disease will develop MI stroke, MI, acute MI or stroke within 5 years, and the mortality rate is quite high. Cardiovascular events are more common than circulation complication in leg for the patient with peripheral arterial disease. You must keep this thing in mind. These are how you approach in a person with a peripheral arterial disease. If a person has got a local symptoms and systemic symptoms, so at your leisure time you can go through. Most important investigation what you have to do is a Doppler ultrasound and ABI index. If ABI index becomes less than 0.95, it is in favor of peripheral arterial disease. If it is between 0.5 to 0.95, it is claudication. When it becomes less than 0.5, it becomes rest pain. And when it becomes less than 0.2, it is critical limb ischemia. And when it is less than 0.15, invariably they end up with gangrene and amputation. So ABI index is very important. Doppler ultrasound is another very useful non-invasive technique. These are the two non-invasive which can be very helpful. You can go for CT angio and try to find out the severity of the damage, the extent of damage, collaterals, etc. You can identify by doing CT angio. So ABI index becomes very helpful. Even a simple auscultation for a bruit becomes a very useful tool. Doppler becomes a very useful to find out the site of obstruction. But if you want to find out the length of obstruction, you will have to go for CT angio. And collaterals you can identify in CT angio. So diagnosis is very easily made by symptoms, medical history, physical examination by looking at the pulse, bruit, non-healing ulcer, presence of non-healing ulcers, and then you can go for a blood test like hyperlipidemia, diabetes, ABI index, and then you can go for a Doppler ultrasound, and then you can go for a CT angiography or MRI angio, or you can go for catheter angiography depending upon what is necessary. As far as management is concerned, you try to relieve the symptoms, re-establish the blood flow to reduce the risk of critical limb ischemia and acute limb ischemia and amputation, and stop the progress of atherosclerosis and reduce the chance of MI and strokes. For this particular purpose, you have to reduce the progress of atherosclerosis, which can be done by lifestyle modification like stop smoking, healthy food, regular exercise, supervised exercise programming, medications like rigid control of diabetes, rigid control of hypertension, control of hyperlipidemia, high statin therapy, have a regular exercise program under supervision, and look for coronary artery disease, look for carotid artery involvement, and also try to find out how much severe is the involvement of the peripheral artery. So smoking cessation, regular exercise and diet control, that is we put into lifestyle modification. As far as medication is concerned, one, antiplatelet to prevent thrombus formation, statin to reduce the amount of atherosclerosis and reduce the risk factors like hypertension, diabetes, etc. And for increasing the blood supply, one of the drug which is being commonly utilized, antiplatelet and statin are the two main therapy. And then you can use silistazole, which will increase the amount of blood supply in the affected area. But at the same time, you have to keep it in mind that person should not have a very severe peripheral arterial disease. Person will not be benefited. But regular exercise programming under supervision will help you more. So that should be advised. Regular exercise training under supervision, we call supervision exercise training, should be advised. So statin, supervised exercise therapy, that is very commonly advised. Silistazole is one of the treatment which is advised, and if the ejection fraction is markedly reduced, silistazole is not preferred. So you should get your echo done before prescribing a silistazole. So if ejection fraction is reduced less than 35, silistazole should not be used. In life-limiting claudication, mainly you can go for endovascular option also, depending upon the severity. So in a pharmacological treatment, antiplatelet, you can combine aspirin with clopidogrel also. And for control of lipids, statins should be utilized. And in presence of hepatotoxicity, you should keep it in mind, in a presence of liver damage, statin should be used with caution. And no grapefruits. Stop smoking, dietary control, regular exercise, avoid citrus fruits when you are using all this, and don't use any material which produces damage to the liver. Surgery is usually required when the person starts developing critical ischemia, but first you should go for lifestyle modification, medication and regular exercise. These three is a must, and then you can decide regarding surgical intervention. ABC we call is a angioplasty, which is balloon or stenting. B for bypass, that is grafting, and C for endarterectomy. You can go for any one of these depending upon the site, severity, etc. So this is what is called stenting, this is endarterectomy, and this is a bypass grafting. Depending upon the severity, the length of arterial involvement, etc., you can decide. There is something called as a prevention, we call safety. They are called 8C. This was a nice slide which I got from YouTube. So safety first. So they say 8C. 1. Careful with hot objects because it can produce burns. Caution with foot trauma. So you should avoid getting trauma to the foot. So that is called as a foot care. Avoid any constriction. So tight clothing and long time. You should not sit with crossed legs. This should be avoided. Crossed legs should be avoided. Constrictive clothing should be avoided. Caffeine should be avoided. So you should avoid taking caffeine containing materials. And cold temperature. Avoid exposure to cold temperatures. So this should be avoided. So smoking should be avoided. Contact with the hot objects. Caffeine containing material. exposure to the extreme cold, all this should be avoided. Clear? And you should wear proper shoes. Skin should be assessed every day. That is what we call as a foot care. Shoes should be well fitted, no sandals. Person should hydrate properly because that will reduce the what we call as, when you hydrate properly, the osmolality will be better, and toenail should be trimmed at regular interval, and that should be done by a provider, what we call as a proper medical person. The slippers should be avoided, proper shoes should be used. When you use a nail cutter, see that you don't damage your skin, etc. So all these precautions should be taken. This is called safety. And as far as venous is concerned, one of the important things which can help you is stockings. Elastic stockings will help you in a venous. Complication in a peripheral arterial disease, which are very common, person can end up with amputations. In conclusion, whenever a person comes with intermittent claudication, determines that person is having no wound, no wrist pain, no back pain. If person is having back pain, less likely to be peripheral arterial disease. So always try to rule out neurogenic from vascular and venous from vascular. ABI index is a must, non-invasive method, and another is Doppler ultrasound. Very important clue. And then you can go for computerized angiography, CT angio, which will help you to find out the site, length, even collaterals, etc. Advice to stop smoking and rigid medical therapy to control lipids, diabetes control, hypertension control, etc. and add antiplatelet drugs, either mono or dual, aspirin or aspirin with clopidogrel. And refer to a supervised exercise training program. Advise 30 minutes of uninterrupted walking, 3 days in a week to start with, and then gradually increase. Advise patient to walk through the pain. Very, very important. Avoid procedures unless it is a life-limiting claudication. Then only surgical intervention should be done. So I end my lecture here. I thank you all for taking out time. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate that you are spending some of that time with me. I hope this lecture will be helpful to you, because good number of time you will come across neurogenic more common than arterial, but you should be able to differentiate between neurogenic claudication and arterial claudication. Neurogenic is called pseudo claudication, so you should be able to differentiate a true claudication from a pseudo claudication, and also you should be able to differentiate from arterial from venous, because in all the three the treatment is different, and this is a very useful in your everyday practice. I hope this will be useful to you, and if you like this video, please share with your friends and push the like button and subscribe my YouTube channel. So I end my lecture here.